conference. We had the now Prime Minister, who was the opposition leader then, debating whether Cpac should be allowed to proceed in the Parliament of Australia. We hadn't even had our first Cpac. So I realised then that partnering with Cpac or cooperating and collaborating with Cpac was definitely the right vehicle. And then COVID hit. And I don't know, did anyone see what happened in Australia with COVID? We went from you guys thinking we were Crocodile Dundee to a bunch of old people hiding under our beds. Look, what you saw was extreme. It was a bit of fake news there, but there was definitely one state that did lock, citizens in their houses for 6 months. And it's appalling to think that Aussies let that happen. And it just reinforced my view that the Conservatives need strengthening. We had a Conservative Prime Minister through that period, and he let the Conservative movement down. He's gone now. He deserved to lose.
So each of these gentlemen, by just what you said now, so illustrates the need for there to be this strong cooperation amongst our countries, and how Cpac really is sort of the common thread, if you will, the arsenal in fighting this fight. I mean, you just said something that is absolutely stunning that I hope people heard, which is you had the Parliament debating whether a private entity could have a conference in its country. I mean, imagine that. That's tyrannical. It's crazy. So again, thank you for all of your leadership. Jay, I want to go back to you for a minute, because you mentioned China before. You certainly live in a little bit of a dangerous neighborhood, shall we say. Japan, as everybody knows, is an island. You're less than 2,000 miles away from China. I'd like you to speak a little bit more to that. And in particular, I think a great way to illustrate, if you will, the danger of your neighborhood is to tell everybody what happened in 2019 when you had invited Andy Chan, who is a Hong Kong pro-liberty activist, to come to Japan and speak. This really illustrates what Japan is up against, and now it's far worse.
Okay. 今ジュリーが言ったように、2019年ちょうどご存知の方もいると思うんですけど、3月頃から香港では民主化のデモが本格化してきました。日本もそれから香港も非常に中国のプレッシャーを感じ、そして台湾もですね、軍事的経済的圧力を受けている中、Cpacジャパンを2019年の8月日本で3回目ですね、やろうとしていました。続きあります。
So thank you, Julie. As you all know, probably, in 2019, around March, we started having protests in Hong Kong against the extradition bill. And this was something that affects Japan, the US, and Taiwan, because we feel the threat that China emits. And we were actually having Cpac Japan in 2019, right in August of that year.
そうした時に日本はありがたいことにもうしっかり Cpac できる環境にあったんですけど、香港からもし自由主義の運動が呼ぼうとすると、非常にさまざまな抵抗を北京の意向を受けた香港の政府から彼らは圧力を受けていたんですね。
And we tried to get a freedom fighter, Andy Chan, over from Hong Kong. And unfortunately, we were able to have Cpac in Japan. We didn't have our parliament debating it. But the Chinese regime in Beijing stopped him from coming to Japan to speak.
で、いよいよ彼が登壇する前の日、香港の空港から日本に来ようとしたら彼は逮捕されてしまって、で、彼女の恋人だけが命からがら日本にやってきて、マットとか私とか、そして当時来ていたアメリカの議員たちに涙ながらに訴えて香港を救ってほしいとこう言われたわけです。
And the day before he was supposed to speak, the CCP arrested him at the airport on his way to board the plane. His partner was able to make it to Japan, though, and she spoke to me, to Matt and Dan from Cpac, and Andrew as well, about the danger that Hong Kong was facing and asked us to help save Hong Kong.
その要請を受けて僕らはマットとダンとあとアンドリューも一緒に行ったね。で香港に行って活動家の あっちで非常に有名なジャーナリストだったジミー・ライの邸宅にも招かれたりして、状況を聞いて、そして実際のもう銃が飛び交う中のプロテストの運動もこの目で見てきました。
And we visited me, Matt Schlapp, Dan, and Andrew. We visited Jimmy Lai from the Apple Daily over in Hong Kong. We stood with the protesters. We saw what was going on before our very eyes.
そしてジミー・ライの家に招かれて、食事をして、で我々出ようとしたらですね、もう覆面の男たちのバイクが火炎瓶を投げつけてきて、ジミー・ライの邸宅ガレージ中心にも火事になったんですね。そこ命からがら逃げてくるというような、そんな状況が香港の中国のプレッシャーとして受けていたのを我々肌で感じたわけです。
And so we went to Jimmy Lai's house and had dinner with him. And just us being there triggered the CCP so much that very night they firebombed his mansion to try to silence him. And this is the state, this is what China's threat really means, and this is what we saw in Hong Kong. This is the perfect illustration of what China is doing.
これがアジアの現状です。
This is what Asia is facing right now.
And where is Jimmy Lai now?
今、ジミー・ライは
逮捕されて北京でどうなっているかわからない状況です。
Well, so he's in prison right now. We don't quite know if he's safe or what's going on.
So think about that. They travel to Hungary, to Hong Kong in support of Andy. They go to Jimmy's house for a meeting. And thank goodness, I mean, look what happened to Jimmy. No sooner do they leave that Jimmy's home is firebombed and this man's in prison, all because they want to sit and they want to talk about conservatism and liberty. So this is what we're facing. This is what the freedom fighters of the world are facing. We really need to take this incredibly seriously. So, did you want to say something?
Just wanted to add something there. I accompanied Jay and Matt and Dan, and there's a couple of others. One of the most inspiring things I saw, and also illustrates why this organisation and what I think around the globe, what we can potentially achieve, is Matt and Dan and myself, Jay, we went to a protest. It's pouring rain. The police have got the tear gas guns out. They're from here to the barrier, they're away from us. And it was raining, and Matt and Dan put their Cpac umbrellas up, and the students rallied. Like, we're in Hong Kong, and they recognised the Cpac umbrellas and rallied around Matt and Dan. They knew what Cpac meant. They started cheering, and they knew that the Americans were standing with them. It was very inspiring.
And I think that's crucial, right? When America stands with those who seek freedom and liberty, it's such an important and powerful force. And Cpac is the means, is the voice to have this happen. It's really a uniting force. So Miklos, you're in Europe. You're the sole pioneer, if you will, again on that continent. You're going to be bringing Cpac again this May, I believe.
Exactly.
What are the prospects of getting your neighbors to join the fight?
Look, Hungary lived more than 40 years under communist oppression. So if there is a country knowing very well how to live and how to survive dictatorship, that is Hungary. And of course, you know, when I see this whole cancel culture, political correctness, CRT, Vogue, what do you have here, ESG, and other Vogue things, those remind me of communist mechanisms. They did have the very same goal to silence people, to seize the freedom of speech, to seize the freedom of religion. And, but we survived communism, and we will survive this aggressive propaganda of the open society led by George Soros as well. And Hungary, in that sense, can play a very crucial role. It can be the powerhouse of the conservative renaissance, and we can bring our neighbors, our conservatives allies to the board in the continent, and I do hope so that from here, from the US as well, because of course Hungary is a very good example of laboratory, how to bring conservative ideas into practice. I mean, if it comes to family policies, if it comes to border protection, if it comes to the protection of the children, those are not just slogans or PR activities in Hungary, but those conservative policies had been put into practice in my country. But of course, on the other hand, we do have very crucial issues at our hands to stop the open society, to stop the deep state. Because you have your deep state here in DC, we do have our own deep state in Brussels, in the European Union, and we are trying to fight for the state sovereignty. That is, we are fighting for. And of course, what we face nowadays in Hungary, that's the gender ideology and this whole LGBTQA+ stuff focusing on the minors. They already began in Hungary to go into schools, to go into kindergartens, and the Hungarian parliament adopted an act on the protection of the children, and there was a referendum where, I tell you a figure, there was a referendum last year on the protection of the children and against gender ideology, and 97 or 95% of the people voted against gender ideology and voted for the protection of the children.
It's amazing.
So
yeah.
we should,
Wonderful.
my only point is that we should have our positive messages, and we should show we as conservatives internationally that we are for God, for homeland, and for the family. But on the other hand, we should not forget how to protect ourselves and defend ourselves, and how to fight the fight against the very negative progressive liberal tide that we are facing all in our respective countries, because they do the same. They do the same here in the US, in Brazil, in Europe. That's what we call the tactic of silent rain. Maybe the very tools differ, but as they attack the foundations of our civilization, and now as they attack the minors, the children, that's the very same thing all over the Western world, and we should step up together against those propaganda.
So, what you said, everybody in this room can relate to the gender ideology, where on any given day there could be 5 or 45 different genders, right? We all know this, we see this, our children are being indoctrinated in the schools in the States. You mentioned CRT, I mean, it goes on, and the tentacles of George Soros, people think about it that he's just focused on the United States. He's focused on the entire world, people, and this is frightening. We all know what Ronald Reagan said, right? Freedom is only one generation from extinction. We all have to fight this fight day in and day out, because the left doesn't stop. Their feet are always on that gas pedal, and they are pushing forward.
Just one last sentence, sorry. Their fight for sensitization and liberating people will not stop. Now, a few decades ago, they did have the sexual revolution. Now they do have this gender propaganda. And the next thing, I tell you, will be pedophilia and polyamoria. So there is no stop. There is no stop, I assure you.
There is no stopping them. So we don't have that much time left. Jay, you have the same experience. What is it like in Japan from the perspective of these woke ideologies?
日本もキャンセルカルチャーもそう、それから LGBT もいよいよ法案でもう決まりそうな勢いになっていて、本当にこれと戦わなきゃいけない。で、日本にとっては保守の砦であった安倍さんという有名なね、皆さんもご存知の総理大臣も去年暗殺されたわけです。でも我々がずっと続けて日本でも Cpac を一緒にやっているおかげでですね、新しい保守のリーダーも続々と誕生している。まあ本当にこうせめぎ合いながら戦っていますけれども、日本でも確実に新しい芽がですね、始まっていると、そんな感じです。
Yeah, so in Japan, we certainly face similar things. Cancel culture, this radical gender ideology. There's trying to pass bills regarding that right now as we speak, and we certainly need to fight this. But to speak on Japan, Prime Minister Abe was a very big conservative leader over in our country, and he was assassinated, as you probably know, and that was a huge blow to Japanese conservatism. But on the bright side, over in Japan, I think because of Cpac Japan, we're raising up new conservative leaders to take his place. So there is a bright future, though we're still in the fight.
I agree, and that was a terrible loss when he was assassinated. You, my sir, what have you to say for all of this that's going on in the world?
Cancel culture's rife. Wokeism and cancel culture's rife in Australia. Our last conference in October, 4 weeks before we were to open the doors, we got cancelled from our venue because they worked out they didn't want Cpac there. We had a contract, we have legal remedies available to us, but they don't care, they just cancelled. And of course the protesters turn up every time we have a conference, and they harass our attendees. The police turn up en masse and they have these swarming fights through the streets of Sydney. There was a Marxism conference the week before ours. It was inconceivable that conservatives would go down the road and protest that conference, which is probably what we should be doing. But we're polite, and maybe we need to be less polite.
No, we need to fight the fight. We need to fight the fight. I just want to say one last thing. Thank you, Cpac. Thank you, Cpac, for enabling these gentlemen to fight the fight in their country. You're warriors, and we are really grateful for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
탈모 샴푸. 머릿결은 포기해야 되나?
더나 플러스 모르나?
66가지 자연 유래 성분과 영양 성분으로 힘있는 모발의 세정력, 머릿결, 두피 건강까지 빠짐없이 다 잡았다. 자연을 담은 탈모 샴푸 더나 플러스.
더나 플러스 탈모 샴푸 미주 출시 기념 특별 세일. 500ml 샴푸 2통과 앰플까지 89불. 가까운 판매처에서 만나세요.
잊지마! 공석 탈모엔 더 나나나.
요즘 건물 사야 된다는데? 커머셜 전문 브로커 누가 좋지?
안드라스 부동산이지. 미국 모든 주에서 매매가 가능하다고. 쇼핑몰, 리테일, 오피스 빌딩, 호텔, 웨어하우스.
누구라고?
유튜브에 안드라스윤 쳐봐.
이제는 철저히 준비된 전문성만이 수익성을 창출하는 시대입니다. 저 안드라스 투자에 대한 답을 드리겠습니다.
안드라스커머셜닷컴에 더 많은 정보가 있습니다. 안드라스 부동산 770-802-0688.
우리 한인들의 정체는 무엇입니까? 우리가 자손들과 살아갈 땅임에도 불구하고 언젠가는 떠날 방문객처럼 살지는 않습니까?
우리는 이방인이 아닌 이 땅의 주인이 되어야 합니다.
우리는 반드시 이 나라에서 좋은 평판을 만들어야 되는데 이 나라와 우리 이웃과 우리 지역에서 도움이 되는 사람들로 부각이 되어야 됩니다.
좋은 이웃되기 운동이 여러분 곁에서 함께합니다.
CRP supports liberal price-setting schemes, giving politicians, not seniors, control over any so-called Medicare savings with no guarantees. Funds won't be spent on unrelated programs or pad big insurers' profits. If AARP and Congress believe America's seniors aren't watching, think again. Paid for by American Commitment.
Did you know that Judicial Watch is one of the most widely supported public policy groups in the country? And there's a lesson there, isn't there, for politicians of both political parties. Fighting corruption is something the American people want. Democrat, Republican, most liberals, most conservatives. Who's in favor of corruption? Few citizens are. Politicians are another matter. And Judicial Watch is front and center in doing the work for you.
And now we have some important breaking news. Are you tired of the control big tech has over your digital life? It seems like there's no end to big tech's dominance. Well, there is a company called Liberation, and their mission is to liberate your digital world.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome guerrilla journalist James O'Keefe.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Cpac. It is great to be here, and RC, Maxwell, it's good to see you too. I wrote a speech, but I'm not going to read from a piece of paper. I'm just going to speak from the heart. How does that sound? So what I'm going to do here in the next 10 minutes is I'm going to tell you a little story about Pfizer. And then I'm going to make a major announcement. So here we go. Let's start with the Pfizer story, shall we? Probably one of the biggest stories I was ever involved in, just about a month ago, exposing this pharmaceutical company. We've exposed a lot of things over the years, haven't we, RC? Google, Facebook. I see Davis is sitting at CNN. Jeff Zucker, Twitter, the FBI. But then I saw Dr. Malone backstage. I said hello to him. And we decided to expose this organization, which was quite a story, actually. And, I've never taken advertising dollars. No one's ever told me what to do. No one's ever told me what not to do. So it's really been kind of a journey to expose anybody who needs to be exposed, because that's what journalism is supposed to do, show you the facts. Without fear or favor, as they say. So I have this little mashup. I know you've seen it, but it's kind of funny because, I've never been brought to you by anyone. Sort of like these people, brought to you by Pfizer. Brought to you by Pfizer. Let's take a look at this. Brought to you by Pfizer. You see it every day on the TV screens there.
360. Brought to you by Pfizer. ABC News Nightline. Brought to you by Pfizer. Making a difference. Brought to you by Pfizer. CNN Tonight. Brought to you by Pfizer. VidTweak with George Stephanopoulos is brought to you by Pfizer.
You get the idea. So about a month ago, I did a story, guy at Pfizer. Now, there are some brave people that have exposed this. A couple people in particular who have been nameless and faceless, but incredibly brave people I've had the pleasure to work with. And I am so grateful for those people. Courage, was it Chesterton who wrote, courage is the virtue that sustains all others. And without that, you really can't do journalism. You really can't do anything important. But this story was significant. It was exposing this guy, there he's sitting there at Pfizer, and he was talking about mutating the virus, talking about how people don't need to know what we're doing there at the company. And it got some 50 million views online, and I decided to have a conversation with him. Now, this is my favorite thing to do, by the way, is to confront the bad guys. I actually love doing that. Remember to catch a predator? So, to catch a pharmaceutical executive. So, we go to this restaurant, and again, very quick story, and then I'll make a major announcement. We go to this restaurant in Brooklyn, New York, in the Dumbo section of Brooklyn, and I walk in to say hello to this guy. Hey there. Is this seat taken? What? Hi.
You work for Pfizer. My question for you is, why does Pfizer want to hide from the public the fact that they're mutating the COVID viruses?
Is this real life? This is absurd.
Why does Pfizer want to hide from the public that they're mutating the COVID virus?
Oh my God.
You're on video. You're on video.
Pfizer ultimately is thinking about
mutating the COVID virus.
Here?
So he's shocked, he's amazed, you know, this is happening. Now what's interesting, of all the restaurants in New York City, I picked maybe the one in Brooklyn where I could get a shot like that. And it is kind of a spiritual war, a fight of good and evil that we're fighting, right and wrong, good and evil. You could say light versus darkness. So this goes on. This is one of the most riveting and bizarre things you'll ever see in your life. Many of you have seen it, but I'll just play a few more clips.
Bro, first of all, I'm literally a liar.
So his response is, I'm literally a liar. But I expect you to believe what I'm saying right now. It goes on, it gets weirder.
I'm not even a scientist by background. You know that I came from a consulting firm that does business. This is absurd.
Please don't touch me.
This is absurd.
This is absurd. At a certain point, he starts filming the restaurant owner. I don't know why he was doing that.
Can I talk to you, please, about this video?
Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 white people.
Why would you bring race into this?
Talks about how there's white people in the restaurant. And again, it kind of looks like a sitcom. It's bizarre. That's why I call it cinema verite. Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. But this goes on. He starts getting violent. He starts getting aggressive, caught. You know, these people are caught. There's no way out.
He wants the cops here, but he doesn't want me to leave. So I'm in a little bit of a predicament because she's asking me to leave, but he doesn't want me to leave. So what should we do?
So he locks me in the restaurant. They lock me, which maybe false imprisonment, who knows?
He's filming the restaurant owner, right?
Filming the restaurant owner and things get weird.
Give him what is going on here?
Please unlock the door. Please unlock the door. Unlock the door. Unlock the door.
This is a pharmaceutical executive. A doctor. These are the people making these decisions in our society. Things get even crazier.
We're trying to unlock the door. Unlock the door.
And I just finally they unlock the doors. I walk out of the restaurant. One of my colleagues, very brave people, faceless, nameless people, is so passionate to expose this. I have to sort of drag her out of the restaurant.
We're in New York City. This is remarkable.
I mean, these are the sorts of people I work with. She's like, let me go back in there. So I'm running down the street. The cops are coming. They all, I'm worried they're going to destroy our footage. Luckily, we escape. Let me fast forward. By the way, he jumps in front of the vehicle to try to prevent us from leaving. Okay. So this all happens. Most watched video in history of Veritas. Now, what was the name of the radio broadcaster? Now you're going to find out the rest of the story, yes? What was his name? Paul Harvey. And now, ladies and gentlemen, for the rest of the story. Ready? You ready for this? Fasten your seatbelts. In order to obtain these things, we need brave people. We need brave whistleblowers. We need people on the inside. There were people on the inside of Pfizer who helped us obtain this. To be a whistleblower is to step outside the great chain of being, to basically be disconnected from the mothership. That's sort of like how I feel right now. But I've learned a lot of things over the last month. Having been ousted from the company I founded 13 years ago, mere days after the story. And as this was happening, I was talking to one of these people. And she was a little reluctant to go public, rightfully so. She was scared. It didn't feel right. But after what I went through, we reconnected. The individual who helped identify this man, who helped bring this to light. The person who worked with Pfizer, who was targeted, who was brought into a room, interrogated, who had a red van go to her home, harass her and her loved ones, who was scared for her life, rightfully so, scared for her life, was so inspired by the series of events that have occurred over the last 3 weeks that she's decided to go public with me on this stage right now. And her name is Debbie. Debbie from Pfizer, would you please come out here?
Thank you. I love you guys too. Well, like James said, I was a little reluctant to come at first. I was scared for my life. I was worried that I would end up in a body bag or in a car accident. But I realized that the spirit of fear is not from the Lord. And as a believer, I knew that I couldn't just sit there. I couldn't just sit there and watch people get lied to. People get gaslit. It made me angry. And I talked to James, and he, gave me the courage to come up here, and I'm so thankful to have people here who are willing to listen and who are willing to stand up. And I think we all need to learn to not be fearful. Fear is how the enemy controls us. The reason why our country is going the way it's going is because of fear. People are willing to give up their freedom and their liberty to feel safe. We can't do that. Freedom is not free. Freedom comes with the price. And sometimes people, like me, have to make a sacrifice. I just want to tell all the people here in this room who are employed, if you guys work for big tech, media, a government agency, it's your responsibility to stand up. Do not let these people keep getting away with this. If you don't say something, they're going to keep doing it. That's why we're where we are today. That's why they keep doing it. That's why they keep lying to you. That's why they keep gaslighting you. Stand up. Be brave. Do something for this country, or else we're all doomed. Thank you.
Thank you. I will tell you all that I'm not stopping. We're not giving up. O'Keefe tips at protonmail.com. And stay tuned.
Ladies and gentlemen, all Cpac ticket purchasers have until 3 p.m. today to vote in the Cpac straw poll. please download the Cpac app and use the code on your badge to cast your vote. The poll closes at 3 p.m.
There's a lot to be upset about, but let me reassure you this. I know sometimes things look out of control, but with Judicial Watch, you can be sure there is a way to gain control because we use the tools available to us under law to bring the government back down under control. So if Congress isn't going to do it, if the executive branch isn't going to do it, Judicial Watch is able to do it. Now, it's not perfect.
우리 한인들의 정체는 무엇입니까? 우리가 자손들과 살아갈 땅임에도 불구하고 언젠가는 떠날 방문객처럼 살지는 않습니까?
우리는 이방인이 아닌 이 땅의 주인이 되어야 합니다.
우리는 반드시 이 나라에서 좋은 평판을 만들어야 되는데 이 나라와 우리 이웃과 우리 지역에서 도움이 되는 사람들로 부각이 되어야 됩니다.
좋은 이웃되기 운동이 여러분 곁에서 함께합니다.
요즘 건물 사야 된다는데? 커머셜 전문 브로커 누가 좋지? 안드라스 부동산이지. 미국 모든 주에서 매매가 가능하다고. 쇼핑몰, 리테일, 오피스 빌딩, 호텔, 웨어하우스. 누구라고? 유튜브에 안드라스윤 쳐봐.
이제는 철저히 준비된 전문성만이 수익성을 창출하는 시대입니다. 저 안드라스 투자에 대한 답을 드리겠습니다.
안드라스커머셜닷컴에 더 많은 정보가 있습니다. 안드라스 부동산 770-802-0688.
탈모 샴푸. 머릿결은 포기해야 되나?
더나 플러스 모르나?
66가지 자연 유래 성분과 영양 성분으로 힘있는 모발의 세정력, 머릿결, 두피 건강까지 빠짐없이 다 잡았다. 자연을 담은 탈모 샴푸 더나 플러스.
더나 플러스 탈모 샴푸 미주 출시 기념 특별 세일. 500ml 샴푸 2통과 앰플까지 89불. 가까운 판매처에서 만나세요.
잊지마 공석 탈모엔 더 나나나.
네. 지금 화면이 잘 안 나오죠? 갑자기 왜 화면이 안 나올까요? 네. 아이고 죄송합니다. 화면이 안 나와서. 네, 홍성국 기자입니다. 오늘 시작이 좀 어설펐습니다. 제가 열심히 준비한다고 해서 시작을 했었는데 문제는 이게 방송 스타트 버튼을 안 누르고 저 혼자 방송하고 있었더라고요. 나중에 발견했습니다. 자, 이제 계속해서 일단은 Cpac 현장 생중계를 계속 해드리도록 하겠습니다. 저는 중간에 시간이 날 때 다시 한번 찾아뵙고 내용 정리해드리도록 하겠습니다. 계속해서 보시겠습니다.
Of Crossroads on Epoch TV, senior investigative reporter on Epoch Times, Joshua Phillip.
Well, I think this is going to be a great panel because it's something that has affected probably everyone here in one way or another, at the very least many of your family members. It's actually interesting. 3 years ago, actually at Cpac, I did for the interviews for my documentary looking into the origins of the Wuhan coronavirus, where we thoroughly debunked the whole narrative of bat soup and the Huanan seafood market and all the lies we're being told. But I think actually raised more questions on where did the virus actually come from and why are we not being told the real information? And suddenly now we're seeing that, hey, there's a lot more to this than we may have thought even back then. Congressman, I know to answer some of these questions, you're on a panel now, or at a committee to investigate virus origins, vaccine injuries, and the whole 9 yards. Tell us where things are going with this. I know you're just now launching it.
Well, that's great. I mean, you're absolutely right. You know, we're in the 118th Congress now, not in the Senate, but in the House. The Republicans are in control now. One of the biggest tools that we have in our toolbox right now, exactly, get us the Senate next time. We're going to be in better shape. But we have the House by a slim margin. But one of the biggest things we're going to be able to do, one of the biggest tools in our toolbox this time, is going to be oversight. And one of the prime oversight committees that has been established is the Select Committee on Coronavirus. And so I'm on that committee. We had our first hearing the other day. And we are going to dig into everything that's going on. We had there'll be a different topic every time we meet. We're going to meet frequently. We're going to have witnesses in front of us. The encouraging thing is that as time goes on, you're going to see this. A lot of people are starting to realize that the truth is coming out. A lot of people are covering their butt right now. That's why I think to some extent you saw the Department of Energy, DOE, come out and say, hey, that, we believe that this virus originated in Wuhan. You immediately had FBI Director Wray come out and confirm that the FBI thinks that as well. Where have they been for the last 2.5, 3 years? You got to ask yourself, right? But and everyone's known this, right? We've all known this. Common sense, tells you what happened. But I'll tell you that there are whistleblowers coming out of the woodwork right now. We're going to dig into this. We had the executive director of the Public Health Association in front of us, which I thought was an odd witness for the minority to bring before, because one of the biggest things, one of the biggest disasters or travesties of this entire pandemic has been the fact that the American people have zero trust and confidence in the public health sector now. None. They have destroyed that, and we're going to get that back. So we're going to look into everything. We're going to look at how they lied to us about, the vaccine. They lied to us about lockdowns, about masks, about the education of our kids, about natural immunity. There's so many things that are coming out every day that are proven to be lies now, and we're digging into all of that.
And on that, let's have a show of hands. How many people here have been called conspiracy theorists?
Right here.
hey, we're all together on this. And lo and behold, how many here were shown to have been right about many of these things? I think, and everyone here. And part of this is because the media has been lying to us. Lo and behold, and I know you've been doing some work looking into this. What has the media been doing, and why do you think they're behaving this way?
When you say media, it's interesting. It's like when you say Republican or a Democrat, we say the media, and as a society, we tend to put people in groups. And I'm going to say something that's rather controversial. I believe it's the media that's actually going to get us out of this. Yes,
I'd hope so.
Yeah, they've been complicit with misinformation on their end, and really kind of stopping information, whether it's related to treatment ahead of time, to prophylax in order to protect yourself, as well as just the whole history of where it came from and all the different policy decisions that have been made. But when you think of the media, I think you have to think of all-cause mortality in the same context.
Well,
so
explain
all-cause mortality is basically people are dying that shouldn't be dying, and people that are 18 to 49 are dying. These people should not be dying, and it's happening every day. And the media's not reporting on it. A 10% increase in all-cause mortality is a 1 in 200-year event, okay? A 40% increase in all-cause mortality is incalculable. So when you think of the media, it's not really the media. It's Bob, it's Jane, it's Judy, it's John. At some point, Bob is going to wake up and his son or daughter is going to die in the prime of their life, and they shouldn't have. And maybe, just maybe, John will be the one that says, that money that I'm getting paid, that the job, just doing my job and doing what I'm told, doesn't satisfy him anymore. And he's going to have to stand up for the life of his kid. And until that happens, until it hits home to the men and women of the media and it becomes personal, they're going to continue to lie to us and give us fake news, et cetera. The minute it becomes personal, and it's coming, for all you media out there, it's coming. You're just humans like we are, 10 fingers and 10 toes. You're not bad, you're not good, you're just human. And you're trying to feed your families, you have a job, and you're being told what to do by your boss. Are you willing to sacrifice your kids for money?
Well, and that brings up some important questions, too. I think all of us are dealing with the real situation that we're dealing with an overwhelming amount of inherently self-contradicting information. Even, in fact, a lot of the narratives from mainstream media has changed. Things that they said was fake 3 years ago, they're now saying is in fact what is the case. And Dr. Malone, I know you've been looking into vaccine injury and also into, of course, the virus itself. When we're seeing these excess deaths, how do we make sense of this?
So just a shout out to Ed Dowd and his colleagues that have captured the information from, that have captured the information from the insurance actuaries. We're in a situation, as acknowledged by the New York Times last February, where the federal government, through the CDC, has been withholding key information from physicians and medical providers, care providers. And as per the New York Times, the CDC has become a weaponized arm of the current White House. The problem with withholding, there are multiple problems with withholding data, but one of the key problems about withholding data on the adverse events of these vaccines and the consequences of the lockdowns and the mask use, et cetera, is that it's preventing today's physicians from providing forward-looking care to people who are at risk for cardiac damage and stroke and other damage associated with blood clotting. By denying that these are adverse events associated with these vaccine, quote-unquote, products, then what you're doing is preventing physicians from getting in there and providing proactive care. This must stop. The government must become more open and transparent, and they must stop infringing on our personal sovereignty. What we have here is a clear, unequivocal story of chronic government overreach over the last 3 years. The government has used military-grade propaganda tools against us.
That's a big deal. Well, this goes into the whole topic of fifth-generation warfare, which, you know, we were talking about COIN and Afghanistan and counterinsurgency. It's the war for hearts and minds, as they call it. We know that the WHO launched a policy going after what they call the infodemic, the information pandemic. And so however we want to frame it, there was an information war element to this. But this leads us into some of the leaks coming out now. You know, one of these Pfizer whistleblower, well, not whistleblower, undercover camera, James O'Keefe, you might have saw him, had an individual from Pfizer saying that they were looking into directed evolution. That raised some questions on, well, are they doing gain of function? What is directed evolution? Congressman, I know you're looking into some of this with Pfizer. What are you getting in terms of what Pfizer has been doing with this type of research that could be maybe even illegal?
Well, we don't know exactly, right? But their director of vaccine development, or their chief executive officer for vaccine development, was caught on tape, like you said, talking about this stuff, and clearly indicated that they were doing gain of function testing, that they were calling it something, had another cute name for it, but it was gain of function testing. But the disturbing part was that, you know, well, that's disturbing enough, but that they were also doing it for financial benefit, that they were trying to come up with the next strain so they could get ahead of it, so they could keep pushing, you know, this vaccine development. Because, you know, ask yourself, if they're lying to us about all this stuff, which they are, right? And the cover-ups being enabled by social media, by big tech, by big pharma, you know, by the mainstream media, by the FDA, the CDC, all the branches of the executive branches of government. If all of these people are trying to cover this up, what are the motivations? I'll tell you, everybody has their own motivations. I'm a firm believer that the Democrats in general, the party, their primary motivation was mail-in ballots. That's how they won this last election. COVID, they wouldn't have won this election without COVID and the mail-in ballots and all the crap that followed that. So I think that's their motivation, but I think that what happened is Big Pharma saw an opportunity here, and they saw this as a major cash cow, and I think that they want to keep it going for as long as they can. They want to make it a mandatory vaccine you have to get every single year. Everyone in the world has to get one, including your kids that are 6 months old, which is absolutely, positively ridiculous and dangerous, and that's malpractice in my mind. So we're gonna go after them on this, and our committee is going to get to the bottom of this, and we're going to hold Pfizer and everybody else responsible.
So I'd like to jump in on this particular topic. When I first started doing my research, I thought the same thing. I thought that this was about an election or it was about money. And the deeper I got into the topic, I realized that, in my personal opinion, that's really not the case. For any of you that haven't done it, just print out Agenda 21 on 2 pages. And it's that thick. 1992. These people were dead serious about it, and they have a timeline that they're trying to hit. Agenda 2030 is smaller, but it's an addendum to it. So I think it's a little deeper than that, a little more nefarious than that. I think it's probably the most well-planned psyop in the history of the universe, and I think that And I'll also say, I don't think that the average politician in Washington is aware, and I don't think that I don't think Democrats are evil. I think the average Democrat is just like us. We may, I think Democrats and Republicans, quite frankly, would agree on 90% of policy, 90%. But the right and the left want us to think we're polar opposite ends. They want us divided, right? So there's a lot of really good people in the world. There's a lot of really good politicians fighting the fight every day. There's a lot of really great doctors. But the whole medical profession has changed where doctors are now employees. I don't know if you know that. I learned that last night. They said, hey, we're working for these big private equity-backed organizations now. We used to be independent. But all the independent doctors were the ones that got doxxed and kicked out and silenced and stuff. But the corporate doctors, they have the same issue that the media has. These corporate doctors are going to lose some of their family members, and they're going to have to step up and say, listen, I know I train, I know I like to make a lot of money, but I have got to get on the side of right on this and inform the American people what's really going on.
That actually happened with Asim Lohatra. I'm going to nitpick a little bit with your thesis, and I appreciate the logic of trying to bring us together and, of course, the conservative big tent approach. We absolutely need to bring the rest of the population, the persuadable middle, along with us. They've been hypnotized, and we need to help them break free of that. But we have something else. We have a culture that's developed on the West Coast. It's been actively fomented. It is deeply embedded in Silicon Valley and the tech sector. And Hannah Arendt speaks of the banality of evil. The banality of evil seems to reside in Silicon Valley right now. We see this in the Twitter files. We see this in Facebook's actions. These organizations are intimately linked with the intelligence community, and they've been weaponized against us. And somehow we have to break that link. Somehow we have to resist this culture that's coming through our schools. It's transforming our society. It has no ethics. It believes in a utilitarian future that's fundamentally Marxist, and they are actively promoting it in every way they can in our schools, in our society, in our government, in every aspect of our lives. And what we've seen in the COVID crisis is just an illustration of what's coming at us on every front right now.
I'll just say one thing I'll point out too, Jerry. I see where you're coming from on that, and I think that there's some truth to that. I think that one of the big underlying things is WHO, people like that, globalization, the power that they get, the authority that they ultimately get from all of this. That's probably been cooking for a long time. Probably like you said, before we even knew it was happening. But I will tell you, I'm going to disagree with you on the fact that there's a lot of good Democrats out there, and that we would agree on 90% of this stuff. I work with these people every single day. It's absolutely not the case. Some of them may be good people underneath, but good people don't let this happened to our country, right? If you're a good person, you put your politics aside, you step up to the plate and you stop this garbage, whether you're Republican or Democrat. And there are no Democrats that have been willing to do this, none. And so that's my only 2 cents on that. These people are not doing their job. They are betraying this country right now.
As the only non-doctor on the panel, I just got talked down by two.
I'm not a doctor either.
No. You stay out of this. All right, we got this.
So we have.
No, hold on. I need to respond.
Okay.
Just let me respond. So, anyway, I completely understand where you're coming from, and Dr. Miller, what you're talking about is something that I've got kids I'm very, very close with. And my youngest kid, who sat in front of me one day, and I begged and I pleaded and I bribed and I threatened and I did everything I could to convince him not to get the jab. And my son looked at me straight in the face. And again, there's a real bond, a loving relationship between my sons and I. And he said, Dad, he said, I know you're super successful at business, but I think you're just susceptible to conspiracy theories. So that was a kind of wake-up call to me. So what I did is I started doing some research on, and this is kind of to your point, and I understand where you're going with this. I started doing some research on how did they get my kid, okay? So I'm going to tell you how they got my kid and maybe some of your kids and how they got the left.
So we've got about 3 minutes. So maybe
I'm going to go so fast.
Okay.
Social distancing, border crisis, killing of American energy, ESG, censorship, weaponizing the federal government against citizens, train wrecks, food processing plants burning up mysteriously, cows dying, chickens dying. I could go on, and every 2 weeks, there's a new problem, and it's pretty big, right? Do some research on brainwashing, just do it. The number one component, the number one thing that they do to brainwash people is fear. And people get so afraid that they change their identity rather than deal with the issue at hand. We are getting played. They are flooding the zone so that we don't focus on the most important thing in society today, which is COVID. Number one, and these I wouldn't even call them vaccines, they're not vaccines. It is the number one issue. My point is this, they've been brainwashed, these are, but they're not bad people. They're literally afraid. And if we don't show them some compassion and understand that the reason they have the views they have is they're literally scared to death, we need to learn how to unbrainwash people. Sorry.
You're all good. So about maybe 1 minute and then 1 minute, so hello.
So quickly, key message. We have been subjected to the most massive PSYOPs propaganda campaign in the history of the Western world for 3 years. Second key message, there must be accountability. Yes, we need to forgive. We need to forgive those around us, our family and friends, and the poor soul in the grocery line that still has the face nozzle. But people have got to be held accountable. Third point is that this is just the beginning. This is just the start of, as being pointed out, really a multi-pronged strategy to subvert the United States by people who do not believe in an independent nation state, who believe in a one world order, a world government that's not elected, and it's up to us to stop that.
Hey, we got 3 more minutes. We got 3 more minutes from Mr. Schlepp himself. So, Congressman, any response?
I'll just say real quick that I really appreciate Cpac. I appreciate Matt and Mercedes. I appreciate all of you here because you keep the light shining on these issues. And without you and your support and your interest in what's going on in this country, we'd be in real trouble. I will tell you, as a member of the Select Committee on Coronavirus and as a member of the Republican House of Representatives, not too many people came to Congress looking for this fight. I came to Congress looking for a fight, looking for this fight. I'm going to do something about it. I promise you. I don't give a damn what they say about me. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you being here.
So we were graciously given a few more minutes. So, by the way, folks, if you want to read a good book on menticide, you can read Rape of the Mind. And really, it really emphasizes what we are facing, which was a massive information campaign. And I know we have 3 folks here at different ends of that. We have really some from the inside who refused to be silenced, even though they tried everything they could. We have someone investigating this from the from the congressional standpoint. We have someone really from more the business and independent standpoint coming out, and myself, a journalist. I think when we're facing this, I guess just last statements on what we can do when facing an information campaign like this, because we are facing people, as you mentioned, who've been misled. Do we throw them under the bus, or do we try to show them how they've been misled? Last thoughts.
I think the adversary needs to be respected. They're very good at what they do. They've planned this for a long period of time. This is a global initiative. I don't remember in my lifetime ever hearing multiple heads of state repeating the same slogan in my life, build back better. It's never happened in my lifetime, right? And then when we watch what happened with COVID, they all use the same crazy methods of dealing with it, right? Social distancing, mask. There's 50+ reports over history told us masks did not stop viruses. We knew this. And then all of a sudden, the other day, one drop says, hey, by the way, the mask didn't work. I mean, it's insane. So if you think this is a local problem, it's not. This is a global problem. Yeah. I personally, I have nothing but respect for our government. I had the privilege of touring our Capitol the other day, and I mean, it's awe-inspiring. I don't know that the political side is going to be difficult. It's going to have to be the people that push this. It's going to have to be the media. It's going to have to be the doctors. It's going to have to be you guys getting mad enough as you see friends and relatives die that shouldn't die. Like they're trying to kill you. It's a fact. I'll say one last thing and I'll shut up and leave it to the experts. But there was a chart that came out the other day that showed that the VAERS data, more people are dying in Republican states. Well, I've done enough research to know that VAERS is very underreported. So what I did is I went and I said, hey, I wonder if I could find excess mortality by state. And son of a gun, I found it. Did you know the top 26 states as a percentage of the people that are vaccinated in excess mortality are all red? 24 out of 26 states, all red. You don't think there's an agenda, there's an agenda. They don't want free thinkers. And if you don't defend yourself, it's going to be too late.
I'll be real quick and turn it over to Dr. Malone. I just want to say, like the web of misinformation and the deceit that they've been sowing for a long time, it's unraveling right now before our eyes. I do agree with you that one of the people that are, or one of the entities that's probably going to get us out of this in the long run is going to be the press, because they're going to turn on these people whenever it's obvious that they've been lying, and we're going to make sure that that we make that obvious. But you'll see as whistleblowers come out and as we start having hearings and stuff, we're going to see that that they did lie to us. They spread misinformation. The left did, the White House did, and that's going to become obvious, and then the press is going to slowly start reporting some of that. Your friends and neighbors who have not been like-minded with you are going to start seeing things your way. I think the main thing is get out, get the vote out. We got to get the House, we got to get the Senate, we got to keep the House. Just keep giving us momentum, and we'll make a difference. I promise.
Dr. Malone.
3 points. The vaccine injured need to stop being gaslit. They need to be recognized. They need to be compensated. They need to be treated. Second point, there are treatment protocols coming online, Paul Merrick in particular, I wish to give a shout out for. There is hope for all of us in terms of those that have been vaccine damaged and wish to clear the spike protein from their body. There are new technology platforms. Third, I want to confirm this has been a conspiracy. There is no question there has been nefarious actors, okay? They have exploited this for financial reasons, and that's not a conspiracy theory. That's truth.
Thank you, everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, up next, Law and Disorder. Please welcome, from Michigan, District Attorney Peter Lucito. From West Virginia, Attorney General Patrick Morrissey. Senior Fellow at Right on Crime, Jaron K. Smith. And your moderator, former Acting United States Attorney General Matt Whitaker.
You made it. Hello, Cpac. Have a seat. How's everybody doing today? Well, this is a panel that I think I'm really looking forward to. Not only is it 3 of my friends, but it's also, I think, so important because you, like me and others in this country, are feeling the woke policies, the lack of prosecuting crimes. When you go into a store, it's now locked with a security guard and you have to gain access because of the smash and grab crimes and other nuisance and violent crimes that aren't even being enforced by our prosecutors. You know, these 3 gentlemen are experts, and I think we really cover the local prosecution angle, the state prosecution angle, the state criminal appeal angle, policy on crime and punishment, and then, of course, you know, my experience being a federal prosecutor as well. But I want to, you know, first, Jaron, why don't you talk a little bit about what's going on with this spike in violent crime in our major cities, and why the left doesn't seem to want to actually bring criminals to account.
Sure. So I think it all really started with this big rally by the left to defund the police. Right after lockdowns and the protests of 2020, you've seen many police departments roll back funding, take funding and focus it on other issues, as well as lockdowns from schools and young kids not being able to go to schools. That all contributed to the rise in violent crime. And what we've also seen is double downing by DAs not enforcing the law. And so when you have police officers arrest individuals, you have individuals get let go by the district attorneys. And we're a party of law and order, and that's why we started Public Safety Solutions.
And we also back the men and women of law enforcement, don't we?
Amen. And so we started Public Safety Solutions, which brings right of center organizations to promote principles around, funding the police, around evidence-based policy, around having the police focus on solving violent crime and preventing violent crime, and continuing more smart on crime policies. But it's gotten really out of control, man.
Yeah, General, following along as the Attorney General of West Virginia, you are obviously also seeing in your communities a rise in violent crime. The fentanyl crisis and the lack of security on the border is definitely affecting your fellow citizens. I want you to talk a little bit about what you're seeing from your perspective.
Absolutely, and it's so great to be back here at Cpac. Over the last few years, we've seen a rapid change in terms of the effects of immigration in the heartlands right in West Virginia. We're, as AGs, fond of saying that every state is a border state because we're seeing massive numbers of people slaughtered in West Virginia due to the fentanyl that originates in China, goes through the Mexican drug cartels, makes its way across the border right into wild and wonderful West Virginia. And I think it's a deliberate effort because they could stop it if they just enforce the laws.
Amen.
I think that the concern that I have when I look at what this Biden administration is doing, it's abdicating the rule of law and enforcement in virtually every area because they want to disintegrate the foundations of what gird up our republic and our Constitution. And I think it comes from that kind of very bad perspective.
Yeah, Peter, I mean, you're a tough prosecutor. You're a rule of law. You understand that the people in your county want law and order. But how are these policies affecting the police that you work with and the neighborhoods that you're sworn to protect?
First of all, Matt, everybody has their ideas, but the idea is this: either we have a law or we don't. Either we enforce it or we don't.
Right.
And if you don't enforce it, then what the hell did you take the job for? Right. I took an oath of office to uphold the law, and if you don't uphold the law, then you shouldn't be in the position. The second thing is it's tough enough to get police officers to hold the fort for all of us. We insure ourselves through our tax dollars and whatnot to have those at the front line when we need them. The fact that you wanted to fund somebody who's going to save your life or protect you and your family, there's got to be some motivation for what's going on.
Yeah.
That's what I see.
Yeah.
And I won't allow it. If a warrant comes up and it meets the elements of the crime, because we're supposed to be ministers of justice. Right. We're supposed to be there for the ensuring of getting the conviction done when there's bad guys and bad people in our society. If not, why are we there?
Yeah.
No, I agree. And Jerron, you and I worked in the Trump administration together, and we got some interesting things done. But one of the things that we tried to do is get some data-driven policies in place, because ultimately you want to put your resources into things that protect communities. You don't just want to burn all your money and not know where it is. So we looked at data, we implemented policies that followed that data. Talk a little bit about the work you're doing, really nationwide.
Sure. So we're doing a cities tour with Mayor Suarez, the mayor of Miami. Miami, by the way, is a place where crime has gone down. I think their murder rate is at a 50-year low. but they've cut taxes and they've grown the economy. And so it's a shining beacon of what an American city should look like. And so we're working with him and going on the road to places like Memphis, to places like Dallas and Columbia, South Carolina, and we're talking about those best practices work. In the Trump administration, we wrote 2 executive orders focused on policing, focused on bringing the police and community together, and also holding individuals accountable for being the best-in-class police force. And so at a time where we need the police the most, we need to not only fund the police, we need to get them all the resources they need to do away with violent crime. And we've shown that's been an evidence way of solving some of the violent crime across the nation.
Yeah, General Morrissey, what do you think is the solution? We are facing some serious challenges in law enforcement. We have, retention, recruitment, pay. You're having places like Florida, surprisingly, are pulling good law enforcement from states that don't support law enforcement. As you get around and talk to the men and women that protect and serve us, what are you telling them is the reason for hope?
I think one of the most important things everyone in this room could do is to reinstill the notion that serving as a law enforcement officer is a noble job.
Hello.
Just let's start with that, right? And I think the damage that was done all those years when you saw the riots go on unchecked and people went after law enforcement, it not only made it more difficult to recruit law enforcement to West Virginia because the financial challenges, but people were being attacked. These are people putting their lives on the line, and they're getting ostracized every day. If there's one thing we could all do is we could recognize enforcement of the law is a foundation point of a civil society. Let's do it. Let's encourage more people to join the Men in Blue.
Yeah, Peter.
Accountability. To the General's point, accountability. We have accountability both ways. We have accountability to the public that we serve, and that would be to get the conviction when they do wrong. We also have accountability for law enforcement, and we have a duty to go ahead and make it fair, balanced, and equal for everyone. Doesn't matter who they are.
Yeah.
That's right.
Holding political or influential people accountable, that's what the justice system is. It's supposed to be just.
Yeah, and when I was at the Department of Justice, we spent a lot of time on Chicago. We sent ATF resources to Chicago. Obviously, their violent crime problem has continued to spiral out of control. But to your point, Peter, what was obvious to me is the political accountability was gone. In fact, they were begging to keep the consent decree in place that allowed a federal judge and a monitor to run the police department instead of the politically elected mayor and city council. And so I want to ask Cpac a question here. Do you believe that there's a two-tiered system of justice in America? And do you think that's fair? Do you think that conservatives are targeted for speech? And do you think liberals get away scot-free? Yeah, so let's talk about that, Peter, in reverse order now. I want you to comment about that because I know in your district that there's not a two-tiered system of justice. You are an equal opportunity prosecutor, and if you violate the law, you put them in jail.
I served, Matt, as a number 1 probation officer, parole officer back in college. When I went on and I got to the defender's office in law school for 2 years, 30 years as a criminal lawyer, a lawmaker for 6 up in Lansing in the Senate and the House, making policy, as Jaron said, but also now having to enforce that policy that I made by being a lawmaker, a prosecutor, chief law enforcement official of Macomb County. What does that mean? That means that I have an absolute duty to not only the people that I serve, but also making judges accountable every single day, making sure they do their job, and making sure that there is justice on the bonds that are set, as well as distribution of the justice when it comes out as to the fairness of the sentencing. That's exclusively in the judge's hands, but we are going to make sure that justice is done across the board, regardless of who you are.
Yeah, Patrick, along those same lines, Patrick, what do you think as you look at these rogue prosecutors, the Soros prosecutors that have won in very blue cities, for example, that don't want to enforce the law? what's the solution? Obviously there's not a competitive right-left election, and so you're ending up in these primaries, and the money's being put into the extreme left candidate. How do we undo that? Each state's unique, but talk about.
Look, I think what we all have to do is make sure that we're educating people of one of the traditional roles of law enforcement. It goes back to that. And I don't think that there's a Democrat or Republican crime problem. We see primaries across the country where there are Democrats that want to get protected from criminals coming into their homes in the middle of the night. So I think that there's an appetite to educate across the board. To me, that's the most important part, because the problem is once you get a woke prosecutor in there, they're going to do a lot of damage. You could try to write around them. You could try to set all the rules, make it hard for them to disregard it, but it's hard to get away with prosecutorial discretion. So the best thing to do is a lot of education work up front to let people know the law enforcement arm is not there to make the law or to substitute his own discretion for the legislature who decides the penalty. He's there to enforce it evenly, blind to political affiliation and economic status. The more we get that message out, the better off we are.
Yeah.
Amen. Yeah, just to double down on
please,
that.
Ron.
I mean, look, get those guys fired. I mean, we've seen that happen in San Francisco.
Yeah.
You saw that the current mayor of Chicago just got fired by her electorate. And look, President Trump tried to work with her. You know, from the beginning of her administration, they said, let us help in Chicago, because he has a heart for our inner cities, being a New Yorker.
Yeah.
And it's a shame what's happened to our inner cities. And so we have to educate the voters and let them know the irresponsible work that they've done with their elected officials and get people in there that's going to get the job done.
Well, and actually, just to build on that point, some states actually allow a governor or an AG to really have more oversight on it. So you have to go state by state and making sure that you're putting the mechanisms in place to have that accountability, to have that supervision, to make sure that these woke guys can't get away with it.
Right. And we need to recall these folks that aren't enforcing the law. We need to remove them from office. We need to beat them in elections. Wherever necessary, we need to make sure that we do have respect for the rule of law and that law and order prevails in our neighborhoods. Go ahead.
We have currently a distrust as it relates to law enforcement, and that's the kind of facade that the other side wants to give. There shouldn't be a distrust. There should be an embracement of the officers that do their job and do it well, and go ahead and commend those individuals. And most importantly, to their points here, what about our First Amendment, Matt? Why don't we call them all out? And this is the reason. I don't know what consistency is. If I go ahead and I have the Attorney General that's not going to enforce the law, but a local politician that is sitting in the county prosecutor's seat enforce it, there is no consistency, uniformity, and no certainty in our justice system. And that fails for everyone.
No, that's right. I mean, you're right. I always say we need to get back to the basic blocking and tackling, the fundamental tenets of law enforcement, of our constitutional republic, of holding people accountable to the law, not necessarily over-criminalizing things, but like we know, the police know who the bad actors are. They know who are committing the majority of the crimes. Being smart, being tactical, using data to drive that law enforcement mission is so important. Jerron, as we wrap up here today, what's one thing that you would like our friends here at Cpac to know?
Well, look, you said it. You hit the nail on the head. 1% of the individuals in any given city is doing 70% of the crime. So we know who the individuals are. But we need the resources. One of the things that we should always fund in our society is public safety. That's one of the proper functions of government, is to take care of our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And so funding the police gives you the ability to kind of create that trust with communities. The strategy around focused deterrence brings police and communities together, because unlike the left is trying to spread these lies, 80% of minority communities want police. 80% of any underserved community want police and want protections. And they can have both. They can have their civil liberties protected, and they can have safe community. It's the bedrock of the American society.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah. Patrick, what would you like? One thing that you'd like to share with our fine folks as we conclude.
Everyone in law enforcement needs to serve as an example that you're upholding the rule of law, no matter how difficult it is. Sometimes you have to go after issues. You may not be popular in enforcing a law. You do it anyway because that's what upholds our republic and our Constitution. When you start substituting your own judgment for others, that's when you run into trouble. So uphold the law, irrespective of politics and economic status.
Peter, what's one thing you would like our friends here to remember?
Make sure that there's equal justice, and that means in every community from the top to the bottom. Make sure that you're showing that there's fundamental fairness, which means every day that you go ahead and do your job as a prosecutor, a police officer, it's by the book. Don't make the rules up as you go along because there's no certainty. And lastly, respect those that are in these jobs. You can go ahead and use your First Amendment to call them out when they did the wrong thing, but darn it, they've got your backs every day. You should have theirs, and don't forget it.
Amen.
As I'm saying, we need to make sure we do the basic blocking and tackling of law enforcement, that we restore the rule of law, that we have a one-tiered system of justice where every child can play in their own front yard. But what can you do? What can you do? One thing you can do today, you can do right now after this session, is there's going to be a lot of law enforcement here because Donald Trump's speaking this afternoon. Tell one of those members of law enforcement thank you. And if you know somebody that has a family member that's in law enforcement that every day doesn't know whether they're coming home that night and worries about that, make sure you thank them for their sacrifice, for their service. We need to make sure that these people feel appreciated and valued and honored. So that's the first thing we can do. The second thing that I would encourage you to do is to the points that were made here is where you have a bad prosecutor, get them recalled. Participate in the recall, participate in the removal, participate in the election of law and order prosecutors and public servants. Those are two things that you can do that can make a difference in your community, that can make a difference in your children's future, and also encourage people to pursue a career in law enforcement. It is a noble profession.
Yes.
It is the right thing to do. And with that, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank Jerron. I want to thank General Morrissey, and I want to thank Peter. Thank you. Thank you, Cpac. Have a great day.
Nice job, man.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Ladies and gentlemen, all Cpac ticket purchasers have until 3 p.m. today to vote in the Cpac straw poll. Please download the Cpac app and use the code on your badge to cast your vote. The poll closes at 3 p.m.
Oil, the most precious natural resource known to man. It is the engine that drives every modern economy and has provided the foundation for innovation worldwide. From powering our cities and fueling our vehicles to the more than 6,000 products created from one barrel. Oil has changed the standard of living for every human being in the modern world. Just like the rising sun in the morning, oil has become a part of our everyday lives. There is not one facet of our lives that is not touched by oil, or the products created from it. When you think about it, it's pretty simple. We are all in the oil business, whether we want to be or not. Every one of us pay for it every day. Let me ask you this. If you're going to be in the oil business anyway and pay these prices, doesn't it make sense to try to learn how to make some money while doing it? At Panex, we are producers of American oil. Go to panex.us/learn, where you can begin to build your foundational knowledge about the oil and natural gas industry. A perfect place to start would be a morning without oil. This 5-minute video reveals a world that most of us don't even contemplate as possible, a world without oil in it. From there, you can bolster your oil knowledge by downloading one of our oil and gas primers, Oil and Gas 101 or 102. At Panex, we believe it is imperative to educate yourself on all that oil can do for you. Do yourself a favor and give us that chance. When done, if you decide that you too would like to reap the rewards of oil and gas, great. If not, at least you've bolstered yourself with that information that will last you a lifetime. You owe it to yourself. Go to panex.us/learn and see all that oil can do for you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome host of The Michael Knowles Show, Michael Knowles.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be back at Cpac. Oh, stop it. Get out of here. Come on. Come on. I love you more. Come on. Thank you very much. Thank you to Matt and to the rest of the team for the invitation. It is a special honor to be at Cpac this year because I think this year I may be the only speaker who is not actively planning to run for president in 2024. All right. Obviously, President Trump is running again. I'm noticing a lot of governors and senators and businessmen and Candace, lots of other people who might be interested. But I am not, because I am not old enough. So this Cpac has relatively low political stakes for me personally, but the political stakes for our country are very, very high. Which is why I suspect so many people are planning to run for president, because they're seeing what we're all seeing, that when it comes to protecting our country, Joe Biden has failed on every point. It's not hyperbole, it's not a cheap political shot, it's just a plain fact. Our country faces mounting threats on every single front. Inflation is at 40-year highs, illegal immigration is at all-time highs, and for the first time since World War II, we've seen the outbreak of a major war in Europe, a war that we are funding to the tune of $100 billion with no end in sight. Now, there is one silver lining to that particular storm cloud, which is that I believe we can now all write off Zelensky as a dependent on our tax returns, which will help us recoup a little bit of that money, maybe. Basic aspects of life are breaking down. Marriage rates and birth rates are at all-time lows. In recent years, for the first time in history, our life expectancy has declined, driven largely by suicides and deaths of despair, drug overdoses. Our nation, allegedly the most advanced on earth, can't even protect its own citizens from street criminals. The murder rate has reached its highest level in nearly 3 decades. Many conservatives are tempted to throw up their hands. The challenges seem too enormous. The conservative optimists differ from the conservative pessimists only in as much as the conservative pessimists say that things can't get any worse, and the conservative optimists say, oh, yes, they can. Things might get worse, but they don't have to. These problems are not as complicated as many people would have us believe. Most of these problems are pretty simple. The patron saint of this conference, Ronald Reagan, was once mocked for making this point. The liberals, Reagan said, say we offer simple answers to complex problems. Well, perhaps there is a simple answer, not an easy answer, but simple. If you and I have the courage to tell our elected officials that we want a national policy based on what we know in our hearts is morally right. Ronald Reagan did his part. He did his part. But we don't need to look back to the 1980s to see the wisdom of these words. We can look around us today and not very far from home. Until recently, El Salvador was the most dangerous country on earth. Today, it is one of the safest countries in Latin America. El Salvador's president, Nayib Bukele, cut the nation's murder rate in half in just 1 year. How did he do it? Well, he built a big prison and put all the criminals in it. Seems pretty simple. He humiliated the criminals, he knocked down their symbols and their monuments, and he enforced the law. I'm sure it wasn't easy, but it was simple. Demoralize the bad guys, encourage the good guys, pursue a national policy based on what we know in our hearts is morally right. President Bukele explained the secret to his nation's improbable success. He said the nation was turning back to God, turning back to the most important values: honor, loyalty, courage, love for our fellow man. He said those values had been degraded in El Salvador as they are now degrading in our own country. But it wasn't too late. How, he asked, could a nation not rise up with values such as those? If one of the weakest countries on earth can do it, why can't we? I think we can. I think we can. Unfortunately, many conservatives think we might not be able to, because though conservatives have many virtues, we're intelligent, we're funny, devilishly handsome, unfortunately, sometimes conservatives lack imagination. We suffer from low expectations. We think that the thing that we can most hope for is that we halt the left exactly where it is, preserve the status quo, and hope we don't lose any more ground. It sometimes feels as if all conservatives do is defend the policies that the liberals fought for 10 years ago. The clearest example of this is the battle over transgenderism. On the one side of the debate, you've got the liberals who argue that third graders should be taught to change their sex in schools. On the other side of the debate, you've got the conservatives who say that we should wait until fourth grade. Doesn't seem like much of a difference to me. The problem with transgenderism is not that it's inappropriate for children under the age of 9. The problem with transgenderism is that it isn't true. The problem with transgenderism is that it puts forward a delusional vision of human nature that denies the reality and importance of sexual difference and complementarity. The problem with transgenderism is that its acceptance at any level necessarily entails the complete destruction of women's bathrooms, women's sports, all of the specific rights and spaces that women currently enjoy. There can be no middle way in dealing with transgenderism. It is all or nothing. If transgenderism is true, if men really can become women, then it's true for everybody of all ages. If transgenderism is false, as it is, if men really can't become women, as they cannot, then it's false for everybody too. And if it's false, then we should not indulge it, especially since that indulgence requires taking away the rights and customs of so many people. If it is false, then for the good of society, and especially for the good of the poor people who have fallen prey to this confusion, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole preposterous ideology at every level. It's simple. It is as simple as the advice Don Corleone gave to Johnny Fontaine. You're gonna act like a man. What's the matter with you? We talk a lot about rights, and rights are very important, but so are duties. And men have a duty to act like men. It's not complicated. Some people, maybe not the people in this room, but in the online and television audience, they're probably clutching their pearls at such a clear and simple statement. I don't know why. Do these people forget? Transgenderism did not exist as a political matter until about 8 years ago, when Barack Obama and some liberals in North Carolina introduced it through military policy and bathroom ordinances. 8 years ago, the notion that a man of any age had some sort of right to strap on stilettos and read a book to your kids, that would have been met with nothing but laughter and scorn by everybody in the country. And then, a handful of devoted, radical left-wing activists pushed relentlessly to normalize this crazy notion. And the craziest part is, the conservatives now want to meet them halfway. But there is no meeting halfway between truth and falsehood, between reality and delusion. There's no neutrality. We are either gaining ground or we are losing ground. Meeting the liberals halfway will always take us all the way down their road to perdition in the long run. Always. That's the story of the last 50 years. This is what happens over the last 50 years. The liberals introduce some crazy idea. The conservatives briefly oppose it. The liberals stand firm, and the conservatives cave. And then you know what they say? They say, okay, we're fine with that crazy idea. The thing the liberals are saying now, we're fine with that. But that new idea, we oppose that. That's crazy. When the feminists of the 1970s started burning their bras and saying that a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle, the conservatives, they said, that's crazy. Then what happened? They caved. The conservatives caved. They said, feminism is fine, but all that sexual revolution stuff, that's crazy. All that village people stuff over there, that's crazy. And then what happened? They caved. They said the sexual revolution stuff is fine, but transgenderism, oh no, I'm sorry. First they said, redefining marriage. Oh, that would be crazy. Then what happened? They caved. Then they said, okay, the redefinition of marriage, that's fine, but that transgenderism stuff, that's crazy. Then what happened? Now they're saying transgenderism's fine, but just don't trans the kids. That's crazy. In fact, what they're saying now is, transing the kids in some cases is fine, just don't trans the really little kids. That would be crazy. And so it goes. That's how it goes. It was ever thus. From the moment the conservatives accepted the liberals' premise in the 70s that men and women are interchangeable, the moment they went along with the bra-burning feminists, it was all lost because transgenderism flows naturally from that premise. And conservatives became, to quote Michael Malice, progressives driving the speed limit. They offered voters not a choice but an echo, to quote Phyllis Schlafly. You know, there's one issue on which we haven't caved. That would be the issue of life. And you want to hear a crazy coincidence? It's the only issue on which we've won. It's the issue on which we stood firm. We didn't meet anybody halfway. We said murder is wrong. We're not going to give up. And now Roe v. Wade is gone. Deader than disco. No coincidence. National decline is not inevitable. It is only inevitable if we believe that it is. If we give up. If we give up and give in to popular and destructive fashions as though they could ever supplant simple and eternal truths. Cardinal Manning said, there is a day to come which will reverse the confident judgments of men. Those men say we offer simple answers to complex problems. I hope we still do. I hope that we still have the simplicity and the courage to say that men ought to act like men, that criminals ought to go to jail, that marriage, real marriage, the kind between a man and a woman, is the fundamental building block of our society, the basic, unchangeable political unit, that our republic was built for a moral and religious people. And so our country, founded as a shining city on a hill, should always give glory to God and relentlessly pursue what we know in our hearts is morally right, no matter the odds, no matter the consequences, no matter the passing fashions of the day. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, all Cpac ticket purchasers have until 3 p.m. today to vote in the Cpac straw poll. Please download the Cpac app and use the code on your badge to cast your vote. The poll closes at 3 p.m.
For too long, the left have become experts in wielding government to advance their agenda. No longer. We, the people, know what time it is. We, the people, tell the government what to do. In 2025, conservatives will take the helm and we'll be ready on day one because we know it's time to save America. We have 2 years and one chance to get this right. This is Project 2025. Join to serve at project2025.org.
Hi, I'm Elaine Beck, host of It's Not About Us on Cpac Now. This week I'm joined by one of our freedom fighters in Congress, a member of the infamous Patriot 20. You won't want to miss it. Tune in to Cpac Now at 7 p.m. Eastern Time this Tuesday for an exclusive interview.
Ladies and gentlemen, they stole it from us legally. Please welcome, from Ohio, Secretary of State Frank LaRose, former Arizona prosecutor and U.S. Army Reserve Captain Abe Hamaday, from New York, former Congressman Lee Zeldin, and your moderator, Vice Chair of the Center for Election Integrity and former National Press Secretary for the Trump campaign, Hogan Gidley.
Guys, let's have a seat. Good morning, Cpac. How's everybody today? Now, Lee, you're a very important person, but I did not know you required this much security. They locked down this whole perimeter to get us in here for you this morning.
I hope everybody stays once we're done. There's some other speakers coming today.
Yeah, that's right, that's right.
I know everybody's
Obviously,
here for
people
us.
are here for us. It's pretty clear. Folks, I think this panel is one of the most important we're going to see at Cpac in large measure because the policies you want implemented, you have to have the people elected you want to implement those policies, and it's getting more difficult in this country to elect those folks if we have countless examples of irregularities, illegalities, anomalies, and yes, fraud in our election system. And I think the purpose here is to talk about how we can make it easy to vote but hard to cheat. And you guys are kind of in the front of that fight, I think. And many of you are also out in this room. And I remember in the last several election cycles, we've had problems in this country that both the right and the left have been complaining about for decades. But it seems like no one wants to do anything about it. And so in 2000 in Florida, we had hanging chads, dimpled ballots. We've traded all that, of course, for mass mail-in and drop boxes. But either way, there have been problems in our election system. And I think the people up on this stage, and we're going to let you guys talk about it, it's so important that laws are passed in the states, which is, of course, where the Constitution puts that right and responsibility to the state legislatures to protect every single legal vote and every single legal voter. That's what this is all about. So Frank, I'm going to start with you because you are a sitting Secretary of State. You guys have done some incredible stuff in the state of Ohio with legislation, but also start please first with a data project that us at America First Policy Institute, we're working with you on some of that information and data that's so important to securing our elections.
Yeah, absolutely, Hogan. And you know what, as you said, easy to vote and hard to cheat. One of the other watchwords that we have is that we run elections so well in Ohio, transparently, honestly. We run them so well that even the loser knows they lost, right? And that's part of that idea that on election night, you should be able to know you trust and can believe those results. That's the way we do it in the Buckeye State, right? Listen, the data project that we're working on with America First Policy Institute is going to be a first in the nation example of how we can throw open the books and make election data so much more transparent. I've described it like this. Imagine you're trying to invest your savings. You want to save for retirement or what have you. But if there's no generally accepted accounting principles, standard charts of accounts, you could look at two different companies' spreadsheets and not be able to make heads or tails of it. It works that way with election data. Across different jurisdictions and certainly across different states, there is no standard definition for things like what is a registered voter. That seems pretty elementary, doesn't it? But sometimes they're inactive, sometimes they're in confirmation status, et cetera. What is a voted ballot and how many ballots were voted on election day? All of those things need to be standardized. This bill that we're doing in Ohio, called Senate Bill 71, written with the support of America First, is going to throw open the books and make sure that elections in Ohio and other states are transparently run so that you can do that post-election audit and actually make some sense of these numbers.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I remember when we first started looking at this, folks, we took a look at the top 100 most populated counties in the country in 14 swing states and tried to compare the number of voters who voted versus the number of ballots that were counted. Not even close. They don't match anywhere. You wouldn't let that happen at your bank, of course. If you went in there and gave $100 to the deposit slip, came back, said 50 or said 150, there'd be a problem. But somehow, some way, we let this happen in our election system. So thank you for what you're doing in Ohio, but also for your future. There are some rumors in the state of Ohio that you may be seeking another office, maybe for Senate, let's just say,
well,
to help us gain more power and control.
Hogan, I'll tell you this. There's a guy named Sherrod Brown who's become a national embarrassment for the state of Ohio. He's passed himself off as this working man's hero. Everybody in Ohio knows better. 2024 is the year we beat him. Our party needs to nominate a good candidate that can actually take it to him and finally defeat this guy. It's something I'm looking at, but no announcement here on the Cpac stage today.
No announcement, folks. I gave him the chance. You could have done it right here. Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary. Now, Abe, fascinating, because I've been looking at your race for a while now. Obviously, Arizona, for whatever reason, is problematic, it seems, cycle after cycle. You lost by 280 votes, I think is the current count. Seems fair. You win some, you lose some. But when 61% of the polling places went down on election day, talk a little bit about how frustrating that is for you.
Well, how many of you heard of Maricopa County here? See, what happened on election day is a disgrace to democracy. And the same people who told us that, Russia colluded with the Trump campaign, the same people who told us that the COVID didn't come from a Chinese lab, the same people who told us that Hunter Biden was Russian disinformation, are the ones telling us we can't question our elections. The incompetence in our elections is the biggest threat to democracy. So, yeah, I think we have to start questioning election officials, because what happened on election day in Maricopa County when the printers malfunctioned, supposedly, and we advertised to the electorate that we were voting on election day, and I think that was the biggest mistake that we learned. Every state runs elections differently. Some states have mail-in voting, some states have early voting. You got to use the system that we have right now. But we are down 280 votes, but it ain't over yet. There's 5,000 uncounted provisional ballots, and we are fighting to make sure every voter is enfranchised right now. But the reason why I'm fighting so hard, me, Lee, and Frank, we're all veterans. We've served our country. We understand that this country stands for democracy in our elections. And I know more than most what a rigged election looks like. My parents came here from Syria back in the 80s. When you can't question your elections, that's what it looks like, tyrannical government, where the president wins by 97% of the vote. So a healthy part of democracy requires questioning your election officials. So I'm in this fight still because whether it is for the next 100 years, we're going to have elections, and we need to make sure that there's competency and people are held accountable. Because in Arizona right now, look what we have. Consequences of elections are real. We have an open border right now. Yeah. We have criminals on the streets. And the Democrats, once they take power, they are relentless. And we've seen what they've done in Arizona. But, Carrie Lake still has her lawsuit. She's up at the Supreme Court in Arizona. Right now, with our litigation efforts, Hogan, we're fighting because the 5,000 uncounted provisionals, the RNC, by the way, has been really good to us. We've looked at the data. Some of these voters, they were removed from the voting rolls erroneously. So we're trying to get them to count. And on election day in Arizona, we were winning same-day voters with 75%. So we are still in this fight, but the election without elections, we all know there's no country left.
Amen.
Thank you very much. Quick follow-up, though. You put out a tweet the other day I found interesting, talking about how there are some ballots that weren't counted by people who serve in the military in Arizona. How is that even a thing?
So it's really interesting. I actually, in 2020, I was serving in Saudi Arabia with the U.S. Army Reserve. And I voted with UACAVA, right? Absentee ballot by email. I don't think we all accept that email voting should happen. But when I came back, to Arizona, I had 4 mail-in ballots in my house, not in my name. So this whole idea of cleaning the voter rolls is important. Yeah. But here in 2022 election, sometimes when you're added on the UACAVA list, which is the military absentee voting, if you come back to Arizona, they don't automatically put you onto the registration here in the county. So they don't know where to go vote. They voted in the wrong county, for instance. So we are just trying to make sure that if you vote, that your vote should count, especially if it's legal. And it's so interesting. All I'm doing is taking the Mark Elias playbook right now, which is count all the votes and we'll win by a couple thousand right now.
That's right. Well, remember, in 2016, it was your patriotic duty to ask questions about the outcome of an election. If you didn't, you were somehow in league with Vladimir Putin. You were a Russian stooge. But 2020, you were like, hey, I have a question. In 2022, I have a question. And you're an insurrectionist somehow. You should be put in prison. The whole thing is insane. But speaking of insanity, let's talk about the state of New York for a minute, if we could. This man ran one of the best races I've ever seen a candidate run. And I want to get to that race specifically in just a minute. But first, you've been doing a lot of work to figure out what conservatives can do better at getting out the vote, doing the blocking and tackling that is necessary to win elections. Talk a little bit about that and explain to the crowd what you're working on.
Well, first off, all 50 states should have voter ID.
Yeah.
Secondly, what we're seeing this move in local municipalities, we saw in New York City, we're seeing in Washington, D.C., there's others who want to follow it. Non-citizens should not be given the right to vote.
It's unreal.
It's a constitutional principle of one person, one vote.
Right.
And when you give a non-citizen the ability to vote, it dilutes the vote of a citizen. So they no longer have that one person, one vote. When litigation needs to be filed, file it right away. If you wait until after the election, too often it is too late. Then I would also add that if in your state you have Democrats trying to, say, legalize ballot harvesting, if you oppose ballot harvesting, do everything in your power to make sure that it doesn't pass. But this is what conservatives need to do better.
Right.
Once it becomes the law, do ballot harvesting so much better than the Democrats that they regret passing it in the first place.
Right.
As soon as they see conservatives beating them on their laws, they're going to stop trying to pass it all across the rest of the country. Don't sit back on our heels and lose. It's time for conservatives to be on offense, leaning into all of this and win across the board. Red states, purple states, blue states.
Remember, such a great point. Remember, folks, what Barack Obama was able to do with Facebook was revolutionary, according to the media. And then all of a sudden, Donald Trump did better on Facebook. And what did the left say? We should probably censor Facebook. That's what I'm saying. You outperform them with the laws in place, and they'll want to change bad policy all day long. So we've got to get out there, and we've got to ballot harvest the heck out of this next election, better than they ever will, and they'll want to change that policy, no question. But I need to ask you about your governor's race. Tell us a little bit about that, how that kind of worked. I would argue in large measure, we were able to take back the gavel in the House of Representatives because of the race he ran in New York and because of what they did in California, of all places. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we need to be competing everywhere, in all 50 states. I don't care what state you come from, there are important races, especially down ballot. And we saw it, instead of New York sending 6 Republicans as part of our delegation to D.C., we ended up sending 11. We end up flipping control of the House of Representatives. Nancy Pelosi is no longer Speaker. We need to go into Democratic areas, and the best way to get Democrat votes is not to act like Democrats, but to explain why we are proud, principled conservatives. And don't pander. If you go speak to a black group or a Hispanic group or an Asian vote or Jewish group, Don't say, I love black people, vote for me. I love Asian people, vote for me. I love Hispanic people, vote for me. Say, we need to improve safety on these streets. Here's how. These are our proposals. We need to improve the quality of education inside of your kids' schools. Here's how. These Democrats are unhappy with the Democratic policies and the Democratic Party as a whole, but they aren't going to just swing to the Republicans on their own. It's a bad assumption that we are making. Instead, what we need to do is to show up over and over and over again. When your high-paid political consultant tells you not to go to a heavily Democratic area, that's exactly where we need to show up and earn the support of these Democrats. We cannot relinquish the cities. We cannot relinquish the suburbs. We need to drive the message in these campaigns as we talk about what needs to get done to make our streets safer, to make life in these states more affordable, to protect freedom, safety, prosperity, our kids' education, and more. We cannot relinquish anything to the Democrats, and if we're on offense confidently, that will be the path for us to earn a red wave, because in 2022, we did not earn a red wave nationally. In 24, we must to save America.
That's great. Lee, you get everybody fired up. I love talking to you. And look, we used to have to point all the way back to Reagan to say, look at our Republican Party, how great it used to be. Folks, 2 years ago, we had record-setting success in record-setting time because of the leadership of people like Lee, Abe, and Frank, and because of the man who's going to speak here later this evening, Donald Trump. So big success there. I asked Frank, but I have to ask you too. Some rumors out there, there's a certain senator named Gillibrand who may be in for a fight come the next election.
Is that her last name? It's Gillibrand?
Something like that.
This is one of the laziest, most forgettable and unaccomplished senators in the country, and certainly in my lifetime in New York. It is a wasted Senate seat. I would say that the reason why this keeps getting discussed about her having this competition next year against me is because she won't shut up in mentioning my name. She's been doing it to try to get urgency and viability to get her donors to want to give to her starting this first quarter of 2023. She's like wishing this thing into existence. I have nothing to announce. Quite frankly, it wasn't even anything that I was thinking about. All I do know is that Senator What's-Her-Name is wasting a Senate seat inside of New York, and New Yorkers all across the board, from left to right, Republican, Democrat, Independent, are getting rolled and screwed because we have a senator who is not doing a good job representing all of us in New York and not showing up until it's election time.
Y'all, I tried. I had two people up here, tried to get them to announce something. Seems like it's not going to happen. But listen, thank you each for what you're doing in your states. I really appreciate it. Folks, just as we wrap up this panel, I want to point out something I think that is important to remember. We're in a bad place right now, I think, in this country in a lot of ways. The policies that this administration has put upon us is really hurt American families, really threatened our American way of life. But the uplifting message, what you've heard today on this stage, but also at Cpac, reminds you of our best days are still ahead. And understand, I was born in a very small town in North Carolina, and then I was raised in even a smaller town in Arkansas. And when I worked in the White House for Donald Trump, I went on the computer system, and I found out in the first year I'd been there, I'd traveled on Air Force One over 100 times. I've been in Marine One many times. I've been in the Beast with the President of the United States. I even had the First Lady ask me to open for her on the campaign trail. She called me up, hold on, well, I can't do it, but you know how she talks. Wonderful woman. I got to open and go on the road with Ivanka Trump as well. I say all that not to say I'm great, because this country's great. I'm a nobody from nowhere. I was raised by a single woman. I don't have a last name in politics like Kennedy or Bush or Clinton. Thank God I don't have a Clinton as a last name. But nonetheless, I got to walk into the Oval Office every single day, stand right in front of the Resolute desk in front of the President of the United States and give him advice. Now, he never took it, but that's not the point. The point is, in this country alone, I got to give it. That doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. And there is a reason that other people are walking around in other countries like Cuba carrying our American flag, screaming the words liberty and freedom, because they know what you know, what the left doesn't know, that this country is still a beacon of hope and of strength and of democracy and goodness all over the world. And I am very happy about the future of this country, where she is headed, because people like you are willing to show up on a day like today, on a Saturday, sacrifice your time, your treasure, to learn how we can better prepare ourselves to take this country back and lead her in the right direction so that future generations have a chance. Thank you very much. God bless each of you. God bless Cpac. God bless these men. And God bless America.
Yeah, that's right.
Ladies and gentlemen, all Cpac ticket purchasers have until 3 p.m. today to vote in the Cpac straw poll. Please download the Cpac app and use the code on your badge to cast your vote. The poll closes at 3 p.m.
Remember the people who said showing ID to vote was too complicated? They're back, and they have the most complicated, convoluted election proposal ever, ranked choice voting. It's their latest scheme to manipulate elections in favor of elites and against the American people. They say RCV is more democratic, but in reality, it eliminates transparency and accountability in the democratic process. We need to stop ranked choice voting. Join the fight at stoprcv.com.
Oh, hey, doesn't it feel like there's communists everywhere? In fact, the Chinese Communist Party has been subverting America from every angle. So whether it's compromising our politicians, controlling Hollywood, manipulating Wall Street, or infiltrating our schools, they have stopped at nothing to take down America. And I believe that in order for us to not become like China, we need citizens who know the truth. So go on over to getepic.com, stay informed with a subscription to the Epic Times, and you will get instant access to this infographic.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome former Deputy National Secretary Advisor and Cpac board member, K.T. McFarland.
Thank you very much. I want to talk to you today about why I broke with the Republican Party and the traditional elites of the Republican Party. Look, I am a card-carrying member of the Republican foreign policy establishment. Went to MIT, I went to Oxford, I'm a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, I worked for Henry Kissinger, I was in the Nixon, Ford, and Reagan administrations. But about 20 years ago, I realized that we had lost our way, that we were not paying attention to China. That's why I supported Donald Trump, and I joined his administration. And I paid dearly for that privilege. President Trump had nominated me to be the ambassador to Singapore, and the Mueller Commission came knocking at my door. And they decided that I must be guilty of something. They came knocking at my door saying, "We're the FBI, you don't need a lawyer. We just want to ask you a couple of questions." And so the questions were all about the Russian interference and the Russia this, Russia that. And I said, I didn't even deal with Russia in my job. And they said, well, but let's just talk. So after our conversation, where they showed up at my house unannounced, I called the former Attorney General and I said, do I need to get a lawyer? Am I in some kind of trouble here? And he said, no, you're probably just fine. They just want to find out what's going on, whether there had been interference by the Russians in the American election. So fast forward, silly, stupid me, I kept talking to the people on the Mueller investigation until the point where they said, you need to get a lawyer because we're about to charge you with a crime. And I said, crime? I didn't even meet any Russians. And they said, well, we know there's a crime there somewhere, effectively. So I got a really mean, tough lawyer and found out that indeed they wanted me to plead guilty to a crime I hadn't committed. Perjury crime, I hadn't lied to them. They wouldn't let me have access to my files. Fast forward, I'm in the Mueller investigation. I'm in the room. They pick me up in an armored limousine, take me into a concrete bunker. I'm sitting on one side of the table, no notes, me, my lawyer who can take notes, and 5 people from the Mueller investigation with thick notebooks quizzing me on everything I did, everything I said, every memo I had written. They were leaking to the media, taking my words out of context. I don't want to get into it because it upsets me to even talk about it. But at the end of the day, it was pretty clear they knew I hadn't committed a crime, but they figured they could bankrupt me. That they could so intimidate me that I would plead guilty to a crime I didn't commit. And when that was clear I wasn't going to do that, then they wanted me to implicate somebody else, my boss, Donald Trump, in a crime I knew he didn't commit. It went on, subpoena after subpoena. I was almost broken. I lost my faith. I said to my husband, this is never going to stop. They're going to hound me to the grave. I'm going to just tell them what they want. And my sweet, wonderful husband of 40 years said, don't you dare do that. You'll never live with yourself. So I finally said, you know, I'm not going to lie. Do your worst. And in fact, at that point, they kind of disappeared. Nobody had ever told them that before. Nobody had ever refused to be broken. At that point, my husband looked at me and said, you know, you got to get your head back. You got to get your feet back under yourself. Let's get out of here. So we got on a plane that night from New York. We live in New York. We flew to the overnight flight to Glasgow on the west coast of Scotland. We rented a car. We drove to the very far west coast of Scotland. We got on a ferry boat. We went 8 hours on a ferry boat to an island in the middle of the Atlantic where there were a whole lot more sheep than people. And there was no Wi-Fi, there was no TV, there was certainly no reporters from the New York Times. And I had to start figuring it out again. I thought, you know, my career's over. I've just been drawn through the ringer because I decided to support somebody who wasn't part of the establishment, because I dared to believe differently. And I had the United States government, this is my government, and they were coming after me. They knew I hadn't committed a crime. Why were they doing this? What had happened to me? What had happened to my country? And I took long walks in the Scottish sunshine, which means rain, shoved the sheep out of the way, no paved roads, the only thing in Scotland at that time of year. It's dark, people just drink a lot of whiskey. So I realized, though, that what I was going through was what Americans go through every 40 years. Our founding fathers understood that we, the people, meant that we are the sovereigns of this nation, not some elite in Washington. That's why we had the revolution. That's why 40 years after the revolution, we had another revolution. It was the Jacksonian Revolution. People who get in power want to stay in power, and they will do anything to stay in power. But our founding fathers understood if you give us the power, that it is our right, but it's also our responsibility to go after the elites in Washington. Well, right now, what's happened is that, you know, the people in the various government agencies, initials you can't even remember, they say, oh, that's a president? There's Donald Trump? Ah, presidents come, presidents go. We're here forever. You can't fire us. We got automatic promotions. We're not going to work during COVID, but we're going to vote ourselves pay raises. That's the problem in America today. It's not Republican or Democrat. It's we the people versus Washington. And what I realized, me and the Scottish sunshine and all those sheep and my wonderful husband of 40 years, was that there's collateral damage every time we go through one of these revolutions, whether it's the American Revolution, the Jacksonian Revolution, the Civil War, the Industrial Revolution, the Great Depression, the Reagan Revolution, or today. And it takes a lot of courage to stand through. My career is not what it's supposed to be. My life, I get it, you know, but it was worth it. And I would do it all over again if I could guarantee the future. I just want to leave you with one thought. The Bible tells us that one of life's greatest blessings is to know your children's children. I think the greatest blessing we can give to those children is an America strong and free, at peace and with prosperity to our children and to our children's generation. And I am going to fight for that till my last breath. Thank you.
탈모 샴푸, 머릿결은 포기해야 되나?
더나 플러스 모르나?
66가지 자연 유래 성분과 영양 성분으로 힘있는 모발의 세정력, 머릿결, 두피 건강까지 빠짐없이 다 잡았다. 자연을 담은 탈모 샴푸, 더나 플러스.
더나 플러스 탈모 샴푸 미주 출시 기념 특별 세일. 500ml 샴푸 2통과 앰플까지 89불. 가까운 판매처에서 만나세요.
잊지마! 공석 탈모엔 더 나나나.
요즘 건물 사야 된다는데? 커머셜 전문 브로커 누가 좋지? 안드라스 부동산이지. 미국 모든 주에서 매매가 가능하다고. 쇼핑몰, 리테일, 오피스 빌딩, 호텔, 웨어하우스. 누구라고? 유튜브에 안드라스윤 쳐봐.
이제는 철저히 준비된 전문성만이 수익성을 창출하는 시대입니다. 저 안드라스, 투자에 대한 답을 드리겠습니다.
안드라스커머셜닷컴에 더 많은 정보가 있습니다. 안드라스 부동산 770-802-0688.
우리 한인들의 정체는 무엇입니까? 우리가 자손들과 살아갈 땅임에도 불구하고 언젠가는 떠날 방문객처럼 살지는 않습니까?
우리는 이방인이 아닌 이 땅의 주인이 되어야 합니다.
우리는 반드시 이 나라에서 좋은 평판을 만들어야 되는데 이 나라와 우리 이웃과 우리 지역에서 도움이 되는 사람들로 부각이 돼야 됩니다.
좋은 이웃되기 운동이 여러분 곁에서 함께합니다.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Red Menace comes to the Americas. Please welcome member of the Brazilian Chamber of Deputies, Eduardo Bolsonaro, founder of Movimiento Viva Mexico, Eduardo Verástegui, and your moderator, co-host of Cpac Now, Mercedes Schlapp.
Cpac, day 3. This is so exciting. How's it going so far? Are you all ready for the big speakers today? Well, I got to tell you, I am so honored to host this panel with two of my favorite people. They're both Eduardos, okay? And let me tell you a secret. They'll be presidents one day, and I predict that here. So let's get right to it. So let's get started here. Eduardo Verástegui, you might all know him as a telenovela superstar, filmmaker, and producer as well. And he's been our partner with Cpac Mexico. And just, if you haven't seen the movie, tell us the several movies that you've produced and done. Bella is one of my favorites.
Well, Bella was
my first movie that I produced, where I was the lead actor as well, a pro-life film, very important film, a little film that has changed the lives of so many people, including my own life. Not because the movie won so many awards, but because the movie saved so many lives from abortion. It's a pro-life film, very powerful film that has saved thousands of babies around the world, women that were pregnant, that scheduled to have an abortion, and after seeing the movie Bella, changed their lives and kept their babies. Thanks be to God. And then Little Boy was after, and now the most important film that it's coming out this year, it's called Sound of Freedom. It's based on the life of Tim Ballard, a true American hero who travels around the world undercover, rescuing children that are kidnapped for sexual exploitation. Child trafficking is a global problem, especially US and Mexico. Millions of children are kidnapped every year. These kids are being raped 15 times a day for many years. And after that, they open them and sell their organs. And when I met Tim Ballard 8 years ago, I promised to God that I would dedicate my entire life to end child trafficking here in America, in Mexico, and in the whole world.
And this is something that the fake news media won't cover because they want to demonize conservatives. They want to demonize Cpac. And we went with Eduardo and his team to go visit these safe houses where there are human trafficking victims, these young girls between the ages of 9 and 18, and also a boys' safe house as well. And thank you, Eduardo, for that huge experience for us and being able to talk about making sure that we stand together and Cpac stands to end human trafficking. Of course, the fake news media won't cover it. But let's get right to this. Well, this is about the menace. The red menace comes to Americas. We're seeing more communists take over these important countries. I'll start with you, Eduardo, and then we'll go over to Bolsonaro. But really, what's happening in the region?
Well, we know socialism is spreading like a wildfire. We have dictatorships in Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, but it goes beyond those three countries. Now it's in Argentina, now it's in Chile, now it's in Colombia, all over the place, and in Mexico. And, we know that socialism is the cancer that will destroy everything. And these people, they go through, through the elections, and sometimes, they steal them. Sometimes they win. Most of the time they steal them, the elections, we know that. And after they are in power, they take control of the institutions. They militarize government functions. They destroy the institutions and values of our Western civilizations, the dignity of the human person. They promote abortion. They promote the woke agenda, cultural Marxism, and they destroy our society. And now this is not just in Latin America, it's happening here. It's happening in the whole world. And I think events like Cpac will be the answer to remove them from where they are, because they are destroying our society. And I have hope that together we can end communism. It's not just socialism. These guys are communists. López Obrador, our president in Mexico, he's a communist. Yes. He's destroying our country. He's destroying our country. And I love Mexico. And it breaks my heart to see our Mexican people, not flying like eagles high because of López Obrador and his regime. He's a socialist, he's a communist, and we need to, remove him from office.
So we've also had the great honor of hosting Cpac in Brazil. You all have to understand, it's about saving America, but it's also about saving this world where so many countries, where Cpac is having an impactful reach internationally to stop the globalists and the communists. And Eduardo Bolsonaro, along with his father and his family, they've taken this leadership role in Brazil. So what, in your case, and answer the same question, what is happening in the region, especially why should us Americans care about what's happening in places like Brazil?
First, because Brazil is very important when you talk about geopolitics. Only to give you one example, and for sure you are intelligent and smart, you understand me. In case of a war, what would you like to have in your country? Iron to produce the war machines? Okay, Brazil is the number 2 in the world. We produce 10 more times iron than United States. Energy, we have more oil than Venezuela, than Kuwait, than Iran. Food, we are on number 4 in the world when we talk about food producing. But somehow United States this administration is not looking that much for Brazil. I think they are happy with the new president, Lula da Silva, who had a great meeting with Mr. Biden. Ooh. But, I don't know if you know, but this week in Rio de Janeiro, we received a warship from Iran, which is under sanctions here in the United States. Yep. And your administration here asked Brazil to do not receive that ship. Uruguay and Chile refused to receive that ship, but we got that in Brazil. So I don't know how the foreign affairs policy of the Biden administration is working with that, and I cannot understand how a big supplier of iron, food, and energy is going to the Iran or China's hand. So it's very hard for me to understand that. And to the last, when you talk about culture, we have a very similar culture here with the United States. The first embassy that we opened in the world in 1905, United States. One of the first countries to recognize our independence in Brazil, United States. The first destination of our emperor last century, United States. So we are very well connected. So what I ask for you here in the United States, going to the end, Mercy, and thank you very much for this opportunity, is cover what is happening in Brazil. Not only because we are friends, you are helping us, because we are very important for you, and we have to be allies, just like we had in the Second World War, when we fought together in Europe and Africa.
So let's make this clear. Iranian warships are docked in Brazil. Is that not a direct threat to the United States of America and our national security? And then what do we see? Biden and Lula, where they get together, and then weak Biden administration, Lula basically saying our democracies are both being tested. So where is Biden's alliance? Let me ask you this question. How dangerous is Lula da Silva?
Lula da Silva, he's one of the most dangerous communists or whatever, socialists, whatever you call, Bolivarianists in the world. Yeah. They are very well connected with López Obrador. They have the Foro de São Paulo group, which now they changed it for Grupo de Puebla, but it's the same thing. So they change experience. They have strategies to get in the power. That's why it's not a coincidence what happened in Brazil, happened in Mexico, happened in some other places. And mainly first happened here in the United States. All the issues that you look here, happening here in this stage, for example, gender ideology, change the sex of the children, and all of that, first, Mercy, born here in the United States. Then they copy and bring it to Brazil, to Mexico, to Chile, and all of other places. Yeah. And to finish, the first thing that Lula da Silva made when he took office, it was about gun control. First speech of Lula da Silva as president, he was canceling everything that Jair Bolsonaro made during the 4 years when he was president of Brazil. And during these 4 years, we saw the biggest drop ever in murder rates in the whole history of Brazil. Just while Jair Bolsonaro was giving more access for people to buy the guns in the stores, not in the black market. Right. So more legal guns, less murders. Yeah.
Now, Verástegui, because I can't do Eduardo here, but let me ask you this. What is happening in Mexico? There's these massive protests occurring. There's election changes that they're trying to undermine the elections. Gosh, it sounds familiar. What is happening in Mexico?
Same thing in Brazil. Democracy is at risk in Mexico. López Obrador, a communist president, is destroying our country. They want to go back to one-party rule. They are destroying all the institutions, democratic institutions like INE, because they want to control Mexico. They don't care about the people. They always say, we care about the people, we care about the poor. There's more poverty in Mexico.
Right.
If he really cares about poor, well, then why he doesn't do something where he makes Mexico great? Mexico has everything. It's a very rich country where a lot of poor people are living. Why? What? Corruption. That's the answer. But he's, he always speaks about, let's finish corruption, let's help the poor. It sounds beautiful. But in the practice, he does the opposite. It's more insecurity, more poverty. After Kamala Harris went to Mexico, abortion now is legalized in the entire country. See, the US is like the big brother. US is the big brother. It's the most powerful country in the world. Whatever happens here has an impact in the world, for good or for bad.
Yes.
Unfortunately, right now, the leadership of Sleepy Joe, it's hurting the world, not just the US,
Yes.
but Mexico as well.
Yes.
Because imagine why Kamala Harris, que mala. He goes to Mexico, he meets in, private meetings in secret. She comes back to the US, and a few weeks later, we experience what you experienced in 1973. So we need to experience what happened here after the 3 judges were elected, thanks to President Trump. So we have the reverse, Robbie. We need to do that in Mexico as well. We have hope because in 2024, we have 6 years over there. 2024, and the next 6 years, we're going to have 5 empty chairs in the Supreme Court. So we can reverse that. But we need to make sure that the next president, 2024, will be a pro-life president. And then things will change for the better. But we need to make sure here, too, that in 2024, we have a pro-life president.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And if that happens, not only Mexico, Latin America, and the whole world will change. So we need to pray for that. Pray for America, pray for Mexico. Let's make America and Mexico and Brazil great together.
Yes, yes, yes.
Vote Verastegi.
Thank you. God bless you.
Bolsonaro, let me ask you this. Eduardo brought up the Supreme Court in Mexico. You all have your issues with a corrupt, very powerful Supreme Court in Brazil. Explain what's happening there.
After the elections, what we had is a lot of questions about the integrity of our elections, just like here. But the answer is, it was censorship and send some people even to the prison. Nowadays in Brazil, we have from 700 to 800 people in jail. Old ladies, people that were crossing Brasilia at that night when we had problems, just like as you had here on January 6th. But we never saw in the history of Brazil this amount of people going to jail. So again, what we ask for our American friends is to cover what happened in Brazil, because sometimes not even me, I'm a congressman in Brazil. By our constitution, you have an article saying that I can say and speak about everything. My opinions, my votes in Congress, we have immunity for that. But after the elections, about 10 congressmen got the social media shut it down. Imagine here a senator that you like, I don't know, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, and then after the election, they start to make questions about the elections, and then the Supreme Court say, okay, shut down the social media of the senator. This is happening in Brazil now. That's why it's so important, Cpac and some independent media, to cover what is happening in Brazil, because sometimes not even me can come and talk about that, because I will have some punishments in Brazil. For sure, not fair punishments, but they do that. To finish, and give you one more example, you have 2 journalists that are living here in the United States, that they got their passports canceled by the Supreme Court. Can you imagine that? It's like you have no nationality. From the night to the other day, then you have no more passport and you cannot go everywhere you want. They are here in the United States because you are one of our last hope in the world. When you talk about free speech, when you talk about freedom, and all of that. So that's why we need to be connected and changing experiences, exposing what they do in Brazil, what they do in the US, because today is in Brazil, tomorrow is in Mexico, and then in the United States.
And this is not only happening in Latin America. I was just with our Spanish counterpart from Spain, the Italians. they're going through the same type of indoctrination of children, gender ideology, censorship of conservative, government colluding with big tech. So it is a global network of communists working and elitists and globalists working against us conservatives. So let me ask you, Eduardo, we've seen President Obrador talk about hugs, not bullets, this campaign where he basically wants to just kind of make peace with these drug cartels. What's the story behind that?
Well, again, it sounds beautiful, right? No bullets, hugs and kisses and everything. But in reality, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
It's the opposite. So, but at the same time, this is very important because problems that are happening in Mexico, somehow, it's because there is a demand of drugs in the US. Only through a bilateral effort, working together, we can end this nightmare. So our kids in Mexico can come out to the streets and play again like before. Now it's impossible. They recruit them. Imagine you live in a poor area, your kids are playing around, the cartels, they come, and they take those kids. And save America and save Mexico at the same time. This is not about, oh, Mexico, look, I saw Netflix, Narcos on Netflix. Well, hold on a second. It's happening because something is happening here too. So we're not just neighbors, we should be brothers. We should help each other. Then we can make, as I said before, America and Mexico great together. But first we need about family, religious freedom, who cares about the people for real, not just actions, not just words. And in Mexico, we have a president right now that is every day he is in the morning just talking, I'm like, what time he's gonna work? He talks like, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours every day. Why don't you just use that time to listen to what the people of Mexico cares? Listen to them and then give solutions. Not just talk. It's all about him. He's a selfish, he's a communist, he doesn't care about Mexico, he doesn't care about God. He's all about, promoting abortion, destroying, again, the institution and the values of our Western civilization. We need to remove him.
Well, we need to remove him. So there are a lot of rumors that you, Eduardo Verástegui, you're thinking of a run for president in the next election. Is that true? What's going to happen?
Oh, well.
You can announce it here at Cpac. Oh, no, you can't. You can't.
A lot of people keep asking me that. I'm thinking about it. I'm praying about it. You will be the first one to know. It will be a big announcement soon. I love Mexico, and we need to save Mexico. And I think we can do this together. Save America and save Mexico together and save Brazil. My brother Eduardo is an amazing leader, an example of the youth. We need to support him because I believe he will be the next president of Brazil.
Use the code on your badge to cast your vote. The poll closes at 3 p.m.
Everyone is talking about Newsmax.
Newsmax is doing a great job.
The new news network that's changing the way Americans get their news.
Live from the White House with the latest. James?
This is real problems, real health concerns.
What would you do about the border knowing that President Biden has veto power?
From fresh voices who viewers trust.
We can't allow agenda-driven reporting to decide what the truth is.
This is when things are going to start really getting interesting.
Newsmax. Real news for real people.
Pro-Life is a ministry that I founded to primarily fill gaps in the pro-life movement. One of the things that was said to me by my boss, left Planned Parenthood, of
voice. Going where mainstream media won't. RAV is home to the most powerful thought leaders in the America First movement. Join the RAV family, booth 26 and 27.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome founder and president of Run Gen Z, Joe Mitchell.
Good afternoon, everybody.